Welcome to EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and today we're tackling a question that's becoming urgent across European enterprises. How do you hire an AI lead architect for your organization? And specifically, why is Helsinki becoming such a magnet for this talent? We've got Sam here to dig into the real mechanics of this hiring challenge.
Thanks, Alex. This is genuinely timely. We're now less than 2 years from the EU AI Act's full compliance deadlines in August 2026, and I'm seeing enterprises scramble to build the right leadership structures. Most have no idea what they're actually looking for when they say AI leader.
That's a perfect entry point. Let's start with the basic question. What exactly is an AI-led architect? Because I think a lot of listeners might confuse this with a CTO or a chief AI officer.
Exactly right. The confusion is costing organizations real money and compliance risk. Here's the critical distinction. An AI lead architect designs the AI systems themselves, the governance frameworks, the compliance architectures, the specific AI applications like customer service bots or predictive maintenance systems. A CTO, by contrast, oversees your entire technology infrastructure. Cloud architecture, data pipelines, your whole tech stack. They're different animals.
So the CTO is like the quarterback of all your technology, but the AI lead architect is specifically the architect of AI? That makes sense. Why is this distinction so critical right now, in 2024?
Because the EU AI Act explicitly classifies AI applications into risk tiers: prohibited, high risk, limited risk, minimal risk. You need someone who understands not just how to build an AI system, but how to build it in a way that aligns with these regulatory categories. That's domain expertise that CTOs rarely have. By August 2026, every high-risk AI system in Europe needs documented bias assessments, explainability frameworks, and human oversight protocols. That's AI-led architect territory, not CTO territory.
Okay, so the stakes are genuinely high. Now I'm curious about the Helsinki angle. Why is this Nordic city becoming such a recruitment hub for AI leadership?
Finland has some remarkable credentials. They're second in Europe for AI research publications, over 3,800 peer-reviewed papers between 2019 and 2024, right behind Switzerland. But it's not just the research. Helsinki is hosting a dense cluster of AI-forward enterprises, companies like Vertsil Digital, Remedy Entertainment, SLM Solutions. These companies have already had to grapple with governance questions because they're innovating in regulated spaces.
So they've had to learn the hard way about governance. That's practical knowledge that's invaluable.
Absolutely. Plus, there's a cultural factor that people underestimate. Scandinavian enterprises operate with flat hierarchies and heavy emphasis on data-driven decision-making. That's exactly the foundation you need for effective AI leadership. An architect from Helsinki typically brings technical depth, but also mature stakeholder management skills and cross-functional collaboration experience, things European enterprises are desperate for.
That cultural piece is interesting. Let's talk about the actual competencies you need to see in an AI lead architect. What are the red flags and green flags when you're interviewing candidates?
First red flag: if they can't articulate the EU AI Act's risk classifications in detail, keep looking. This isn't optional knowledge anymore. They need to understand prohibited applications, what makes a system high risk, and what documentation is mandatory for each tier.
That seems like a basic screen, but I'm guessing a lot of candidates fail it.
Many do. Beyond compliance knowledge, you need someone who can design governance frameworks, not just understand ISO 42001 standards, but actually architect how governance flows through your organization. They should be able to map AI systems across data flows, model life cycles, monitoring, and human-in-the-loop processes. Systems thinking, basically.
So they're thinking about the entire life cycle, not just building and deploying.
Exactly. They also need change management acumen, the ability to drive adoption without alienating technical or business stakeholders. And, critically, vendor evaluation expertise. They'll be assessing LLM providers, RAG platforms, AI ops tools. They need to evaluate these not just for performance, but for compliance and cost efficiency in a European context.
That's a pretty comprehensive skill set. Let me ask the practical question. Where do you actually find these people? And what should you budget for this hire?
Here's where it gets nuanced. You have options. You can hire full-time, which is traditional but expensive and might be overkill if you're just starting your AI readiness journey. Increasingly, enterprises are using fractional AI architects, bringing in someone for 20-30 hours a week to design your frameworks and build internal capability.
So, fractional engagement gets you expert guidance without the full-time cost?
Right. It's particularly smart early on. A fractional architect can conduct an AI readiness scan, assessing where you stand against EU AI Act requirements, and then design a governance framework that your existing team can execute. That's often a more effective starting point than hiring a full-time executive who might be underutilized early on.
Let's dig into that AI readiness scan. What does that actually involve? What questions is an architect asking?
Good question. They're mapping your current AI systems and classifying them against EU AI Act risk tiers. They're auditing your data governance. Do you have proper consent, lineage tracking, privacy by design principles? They're evaluating your vendor landscape, and they're stress testing your organizational structures. Do you have the right roles, reporting lines, and decision-making frameworks to sustain compliant AI?
This sounds comprehensive. What's the typical timeline for this kind of assessment?
Usually 4 to 8 weeks, depending on complexity. Then, based on that assessment, they architect a governance framework, documented processes, policies, role definitions that your organization can operationalize. This is where the real value emerges. You're not just compliant for today, you're building a capability that scales as you implement more AI.
I want to circle back to the business case here. McKinsey's data shows 72% of European enterprises have adopted AI in at least one function, but only 28% have governance frameworks. That's a massive gap. Why does that gap exist, and why should enterprises care?
Because governance isn't sexy. Building the AI model is exciting. Governance is seen as overhead. But that gap is where regulatory risk, bias liability, and hidden costs accumulate. An AI-led architect frames governance not as compliance burden, but as competitive advantage. Well-governed AI systems are faster to scale, easier to audit, and less likely to cause reputational damage.
So governance is actually an accelerant, not a brake?
Exactly. Companies like Vertsil have proven this. When you have clear governance frameworks, decision-making gets faster, not slower. Teams know what's allowed and how to innovate within boundaries. It's the lack of governance that creates bottlenecks and risk.
So if you're a European enterprise right now, what's the practical first step? Should you be opening a requisition for a full-time hire, or should you be thinking fractional?
Honestly, I'd recommend starting fractional unless you already have a sophisticated AI operation. Engage an AI architect to conduct that readiness scan we discussed. Understand where you actually stand against August 2026 requirements. Design your governance framework. Then, based on what you learn, decide if you need a full-time hire or if fractional engagement ongoing makes sense.
That's smart sequencing. You get intelligence before you commit to a large headcount decision.
Precisely. And when you do hire, fractional or full-time, you'll be much clearer on exactly what skills you need. You'll ask better questions. You'll evaluate candidates against your specific governance challenges, not generic job descriptions.
Before we wrap, let me ask, are there specific warning signs you see when enterprises get this wrong?
3 big ones. First, hiring an AI architect without first clarifying your data, governance, and compliance baseline. They'll design systems that can't be implemented. Second, conflating the AI architect role with the CTO role and expecting one person to do both. Third, underestimating the change management dimension. Great architects can fail if they can't drive organizational adoption.
Those are incredibly practical warnings. Sam, final question. For listeners who are just starting to think about this, what's the one thing they should do in the next 30 days?
Inventory your current AI systems and classify them against EU AI Act risk tiers. It takes a couple of hours, but it clarifies where your exposure is and what governance gaps exist. That exercise alone will tell you whether you need a fractional engagement or a bigger hire, and it positions you to have smarter conversations when you actually start recruiting.
That's actionable and immediately useful. Thanks so much, Sam. For our listeners, if you want to dive deeper into this topic, including specific interview questions for AI lead architects, guidance on fractional versus full-time models, and a detailed framework for that readiness scan we discussed, head over to etherlink.ai and find the full article. Thanks for listening to EtherLink AI Insights. We'll catch you next time.